So, surviving winter weather without a generator and without another parent to help you can be really tough. And we know that there is a winter storm coming. And if it's not coming for you right now, it's going to be coming for you at some point, probably. So, as a single parent, all of the prep and all of the decision making relies on you. But even if you don't have someone else who can take the day off and watch the kids or keep them occupied while you're trying to get things done, you are tough and you got this. So let's get into how you can protect yourself, your kids, your pets, and your property. So in the South, we're not prepared for weather. We typically don't have plows or salt trucks or things that most other places have and take for granted. So even if you know how to drive in the snow, everybody else around you probably doesn't. And you also don't have the benefit of snow tires, or a lot of people don't even have four-wheel drive. So, it's just not really smart or safe to go driving when it's icy or even snowy outside, if you can help it, if you don't live in a place where that is common. So, here in the South, even a small amount of ice can bring the town to a screeching halt or maybe a sliding halt because there's no traction when you have ice. But most of the time, these storms are pretty temporary. So maybe they're only going to last part of a day, or they're going to last maybe 24 hours. Things melt and everything goes back to normal. Other times, these storms can shut down schools and businesses and really wreak a lot of havoc. Restaurants or grocery stores might be down for a few days due to water or refrigeration issues, or even other damage caused by the storm. So if you hear a bad storm is coming, prepare ahead of time and you will be ready whether or not the weather changes. So I grew up in the Northeast. I moved south for a reason, and that reason was weather. I don't do cold. I don't do hot either. So that's a story for another time. But in my whole time between kindergarten and 12th grade, we had a total of 3 snow days ever in all those years of school. It's ridiculous how many days of school you have between kindergarten and graduation from high school. It's nuts. And then even when I got to college, it wasn't a whole lot better. So at that point, we could walk to class, and I guess that was their rationalization for most of that. But just trust me, like, kids have it easy down here in the South. They get a lot of snow days off. If there's even a threat of snow or it's going to like rain on a cold day, they cancel school here. So we need a really solid plan so that we have something we can do with our kids when they are out of school and maybe we still have to work. My kids have had many a snow day on a perfectly dry, lovely, but very cold day. Anyway, when there is an actual storm coming, we need to be prepared. So if you don't have to travel, don't. And make sure that you aren't asking other people to travel either. So delivery people don't need to be out on the roads during this time either. So try not to risk someone else's life for the sake of your convenience. So you want to try to avoid putting your Amazon deliveries on days where there's likely to be bad weather. And you can definitely wait on the DoorDash. It's not really a need, it's a want, let's be honest. So make good decisions when it comes to those things. Bring any pets inside. I shouldn't have to say this, I don't think, but I'm sure I do because there's people out there who don't let their pets sleep in their bed, I guess. I don't know. Does that person exist? It's not me. I don't live on a farm. We don't have chickens here. So if you have any of those livestock type animals, definitely figure out a situation for them to make sure that that they're taken care of. But definitely for any other pets, if they're, dogs or cats or things like that, try to bring them inside, keep them with you, keep them warm. They can be a good source of heat too when they snuggle up next to you. Make a grocery store run or a delivery order early. So at certain times, especially as you get closer to when the storm is going to be here, things are going to start being out of stock. So the sooner you can do this, the better. And remember to include things that require no cooking of any kind. Unless you want to be that crazy person who braves the cold weather and stands outside and uses a grill when it's freezing outside. So more power to you if that is you, but make sure you get propane or charcoal, and do not, and I mean do not, use that grill inside for any reason, okay? But in general, I don't like to go outside when it's cold unless it's snow. I'll go play in the snow for a little while and then I get cold and I want to come back inside. If you need caffeine, make sure you figure out a solution for this as well. So, that might be caffeinated soda or even Excedrin, which you can use in moderation to stave off any caffeine headaches that you might be getting from withdrawals. But essentially, you may or may not be able to make coffee during this time, since if you lose electricity, a lot of the coffee making products will stop working. So I don't particularly like coffee or tea or soup. Um, and I'm just barely start to like hot chocolate. It's probably the reason I didn't thrive in the Northeast. But regardless, I'm sure a lot of you out there do love your coffee. And so have a game plan for how you're going to handle the caffeine, because dealing with kids and not having caffeine is not always a pretty look. All right. So this is another thing that I wasn't aware of in the Northeast when I was growing up. But in the South, you actually need to drip your faucets, which means literally go to every faucet and just let it drip slightly. Just turn it on just slightly. And that will help maintain the pipes and keep them from freezing. So that's definitely a key thing you need to do. You need to do it with all your faucets. And then every time you wash your hands, you've got to go back and find that little spot where you're not like running water, but it's just barely dripping enough to keep it going. Also, fill your bathtubs with water. I mean, I've never actually had to get to the point where I've had to use the water in the bathtub, but I've heard that this is what you're supposed to do. So I'm going to tell you too. I'm assuming it has to do something with the fact that if you're on a boil water notice, or if like the water completely gets shut down for a period of time because of a burst pipe or something like that, at least you have a supply of water you can use without having to rely on the grocery store, which may not be open or may be out of water, to have water. So fill your bathtubs with water. I think that's the reason, but correct me in the comments if there's a different reason for that. I think there's also a way to drain your irrigation system. It's not anything that I've ever done, so I can't tell you how to do that or how hard it is. I always assumed it was pretty hard, but I'm guessing it's probably not really that hard. So go ahead and look that up if you have an irrigation system. I've gotten lucky, knock on wood, that so far I haven't had any damage to mine, but I know other people have. So something to look into for sure. Definitely cover your external hose bibs though. So this is one that has happened to us several times. There's one that is very close to our sink in the kitchen. And anytime that hose bib has gotten really, really cold, the sink to the kitchen will stop working. So there's something along that line of piping that is creating that problem, I think. So keep your hose bibs covered. There's a lot of different tools and products out there that will cover them specifically for that purpose. But if you don't have those, or they're out of stock of those because those go fast, just take a towel and just wrap it around several times, like a full bath towel, and wrap it around and wrap it around and wrap it around, just to give it some protection from the cold and hope that it will not freeze that way. Another thing you want to do is charge all of your devices. And I mean all of them. Anything that has a charging capability, you're probably going to want to have access to it at some point. So charge all of the devices and charge all of your rechargeable batteries. So for us, we have some charging blocks, and these are things we would take on trips to like Disney or something like that, because I would take a million photos. Inevitably, my phone would die before the end of the day. And so I had a small charging block that I would carry with me and use that in my purse to recharge my phone in between taking photos. So that's another good thing you can use, just to have a backup way to charge your phone should you need it. Have those battery packs charged, and they're just good to have anyway. So if you don't have one, I suggest you get your hands on one. You probably want to charge any wireless devices such as your mouse or your keyboard as well. This is probably not really necessary, but they have to get charged periodically anyway. So don't create any additional frustration when the power does finally come back on because you have a dead fill in the blank. Also, get a full tank of gas, and this will allow you to either heat up in the car or charge things in the car. But do not, under any circumstances, run your car while it's in the garage. So that's carbon monoxide poisoning that can kill you or kill your kids. Do not let anybody do that as a way to stay warm. If you're going to run your car, it's got to be outside. You can also have on hand your candles, your matches, your flashlights, electronic candles, any rechargeable lights that you might have. We have this one that we've gotten for for like a nightlight in the hallway, and it's motion censored so that as someone walks by it, it will turn the light on in the hallway, but it also comes off, and then it has like a flashlight at the end of it. So if someone wants to grab this and read a book at night before they fall asleep, that's an option, and then they just put it back on the wall and it plugs into the wall. Something else that's becoming really popular lately are desk lamps that are battery powered so that you don't have to deal with cords and you can move them around. So if you have one of those, definitely make sure that's charged as well. Pretty much all cities, I think, have warming centers. So it's not a bad idea to at least know where those are. I've never had to go to one, thank goodness, but I'm sure at some point there are people who have to use them, especially people that maybe don't have a home during those times. But certainly, if something happens and push comes to shove, it's an option to go get you and your kids warm. So find out where those are, maybe print them out or write them down just so you have that as an emergency backup situation for you and your kiddos. Internet options are not completely off just because the power is off. So your home internet will be off because that plugs into the wall and therefore you're going to lose electricity and therefore you're going to lose internet. But your cell phone has what's called a hotspot on it, and most phones, or at least the iPhones, have a hotspot on them. So if you go to the hotspot area, you can turn that on and you can use that then as your Wi-Fi to connect to for other devices. So if you have a work computer or you have some other device that your kids want to use, maybe an iPad that doesn't have its own cellular connection, those can be things that you can connect to your hotspot and use for internet. So that's a really good stopgap measure if you just need a minute and you're like, just go play a game because I need a second to, not have to be entertaining you guys all the time. So make sure that you prioritize keeping that main cell phone charged. Not only is that going to be your actual cellular device and way to call and get news and things like that, updates on what's going on with the weather. That's sort of like your this day version of the radio. So make sure you prioritize keeping that charged, but also because if you're using the hotspot, you're going to drain the battery faster. So that needs to have a priority on the charging of whatever gets that backup charger slot. So again, in addition to backup battery options, you can also use your car. So you can go outside, you can plug your phone into your car long enough to charge it. Again, do this outside of your garage in open air so that you're not dealing with carbon monoxide. But that's another way to charge your devices. And usually you have multiple ports in your car where you can charge something, whether it's a cigarette lighter or whether it's a USB port or USB-C port. Try to figure out which ones you have, run out there, charge as many devices as you need, and then come on back in. So one of the things that happened with us, so back in Snowvid a couple years ago was, I think it's 2021 technically, but basically Texas power grid kind of shut down and couldn't handle stuff. And there was a whole bunch of drama around power. And for us, they were power cycling us. So we would have a few hours of power and then we'd have no power for a few hours. And then we'd hope that it would eventually come back on and we'd have another few hours of power. So when you're thinking about what you need to do and how you need to live during this time when you may or may not have power, think about ahead of time what you have access to that requires power and that doesn't require power. So a wood fireplace, for example, if you have a wood fireplace, make sure you get some extra wood or some starter logs ahead of time because again, sometimes they ration how much you can get when there's a big storm coming. If you have a gas fireplace, those typically have an electrical spark that needs to light the flame. So that may or may not work when you are in a power outage situation. And there's probably not a way with most of them because you have a glass window that blocks it usually. So it's not necessarily easy for you to get back in there and light it. Same thing with gas cooktops. There might be a way you could light it manually without the electronic starter, but that's going to be an issue if you try to use those. And then obviously the microwave, unfortunately, is not an option either because that runs on electricity too. So if you have an electric cooktop, electric heat, anything plugged into a wall, like a toaster, a microwave, a toaster oven, any of those things, none of that's going to work. So think about what you can eat that doesn't involve any of that. And also probably doesn't involve refrigeration, at least not for very long, because if you lose power, you potentially are going to start having spoilage of the food that's in your freezer and your refrigerator. So initially, when a storm comes, you want to try to eat through anything that you have that is more likely to go bad should you lose power in the refrigerator and then the freezer. But certainly keep your fridge and your freezer closed as much as possible. And again, eat the temperature sensitive food and perishable food first, because that's the food that's at greatest risk of going bad. You may be power cycled. So that means that you may have power for a short period of time, maybe 1 to 4 hours, and then you're without power for probably just as long. But there's not usually a typical framework that it specifically follows. So it's not like clockwork where you can go, oh, in 3 hours, the power will be back on. You're kind of guessing as to when you may have power. So if you're on that kind of a structure, just make sure you're paying attention and you're ready to take action on whatever you might need to do while the power is on, knowing that it may very well go back off again. And if you live on a power grid that's connected to a hospital, you actually may get out of this. I think those are usually not subject to the power cycling. So you may be in a lucky place if you live closer to a hospital. Since you are going to be potentially using candles, make sure you do this safely. I definitely recommend having fire blankets available. These are something that are just really good to have on hand so that you don't necessarily have to use a whole fire extinguisher and you may not damage everything as much. You should still have a fire extinguisher in your house, but this is sort of a effective and lower damage way of trying to address a smaller fire. So fire blankets definitely, rechargeable batteries, a recharger device, candles, electric candles, battery powered night lights, external charging blocks. Those are all things that I would try to acquire and assemble so that you're ready to go should you lose power. In terms of your car, you also want to make sure that you have extra blankets and clothes or coats. So you can, if you don't have like winter coats, then do layers of clothes in your car for each person that potentially would be in your car. Hats, scarves, mittens, gloves, all those kind of things. I personally feel that adults should have these at least for themselves in their sizes, because you're not going to like outgrow them per se. You can also have larger ones, buy some extra, some that are larger for your kids that don't necessarily fit them now, but they can use them in a pinch and then they can have them for several years to come, because they're not going to use them that often if you live somewhere where it's usually warm. But if snow comes, they're going to want to play in the snow. And while you can get away with putting socks on their hands, I did that once. Definitely having some kind of a glove or a mitten is a little bit more effective than that strategy. Another thing that I finally broke down and invested in was an ice and a snow scraper. So even though you might only use this once a year, when it's cold outside, you don't want to be trying to like do all the tricks to get the ice off the windshield when you have to get the kids to school, right? So you don't want to be using your credit card and scraping, the ice off the windshield and getting all of that ice debris on your hands and freezing, right? And there's the whole trick that I would try to with the windshield washer fluid. You put that on, you make the windshield washers go really fast, and you try to use some friction and some melting chemically type stuff, I think, is supposed to make it work. It kind of sort of works, not really great, but it takes a long time. So just get an ice scraper. They're not that expensive, and then it has like a little brush on the other end. Saves you a ton of headache. Just stick it somewhere where you can find it in your garage and use it when you need it and keep it out of the way when you don't. I also strongly recommend having jumper cables in your car just so you have that as a backup. They actually make these things now where you don't actually need a second car to jump your own car. I don't know how exactly this works. I've seen it done on my car. My friend came over and helped me jumpstart my car one day with that, but I don't know how it works in terms of how often you have to charge it to make sure it's charged in your own car, should you ever need it. But it's like a device that's, I don't know, it's like this big, and you basically just have the clips and you do the same kind of thing. You jump your own car based off the battery pack that the cables are attached to, instead of having to use another car or having to call AAA. AAA, still love AAA though, so that's another good one to have. I think it's a good investment. It just gives you some peace of mind should you ever need help and you're in a sticky situation. The other thing I really like is a tire inflator. So I don't think this was user error, but I actually one time went to I think 3 different tire places to try to air my tires up, and all of them had something wrong with their air inflators. And so it was really frustrating. I'm sitting there putting my quarters in that I barely have any of because nobody uses change anymore. And I'm trying to do all this stuff to get my tires inflated, and it just kept having issues, and it was freezing cold out. So take advantage before the cold weather comes. You know your tires are going to lose air pressure because it's going to be cold outside, so the air pressure is going to go down on the tires. Go ahead and fill your tires up to their recommended amount now, and then that way when they decrease a little bit with the cold weather, they won't be like crazy, crazy low. So if you do need to run out really quickly for something, you're not having to like worry so much about your tire pressure. And then for work, I mean, sometimes you're going to be asked to work remotely. If that's an option for you, then you can definitely do that. I mean, you have the excuse probably of not having power, so maybe you don't have to work if there is no power, because then there would be no internet. But if you can get away with a hotspot, or you can use the car, you could do things like that. There are ways to still get your important stuff done, but don't make yourself crazy trying to make that all work as well on top of everything else you're dealing with in that situation. For school, the kids will be off school. They probably won't have any extra assignments or things that they have to do because it's not that long, even though it may be a few days sometimes that they're out of school. So, in that case, if they have access to an application they use at school, then they might be able to get to that on a different device. Or if they have like a school computer, if they're lucky enough to have school computers that can come home with them, then they can do some of their schoolwork there. So, focus on maybe any assignments they're missing or any areas that they need improvement in. So this is a good opportunity for them to do a little bit of schoolwork. You're probably only going to get like an hour maybe of focus out of them on any given day, but it's a good opportunity to let them work a little bit on something they're struggling with and use some of the tools and the apps that the school has available to do that. So iExcel or some of these other types of apps that the schools sometimes will give the kids access to. So I think we're all so used to having access to technology these days that we kind of like bug out a little bit when there's no technology, when the TV can't be on, when the computer can't be used, when the iPad or the phone can't be scrolling. So think ahead of time about what are some fun activities that you can do with your kids that maybe you wouldn't have time to do, or you wouldn't have prioritized otherwise, right? So think about puzzles or board games or some of these other types of things. And there's a lot of things you can do that can be really, really fun. And when we had to go through the power cycling thing, my boys loved it because we got to spend some special time together. It kind of became like this little adventure, almost like we were building a fort or something. I mean, you can do whatever you want, especially when it's daylight and you actually have decent light inside your house. But definitely think about some of those things proactively so that you don't get the I'm bored and when is the power going to be back on. That's not going to be fun for anybody to have to go through. So, another thing that happens sometimes is as things start to melt and things start to open back up, we actually ran into a situation where there was like a gymnastics place here in town. And they opened their doors. I think they did like a trial day, or maybe it was a small fee. I can't remember exactly now, but the parents were so thankful and they were like, let me go there. Let me get my kids' sillies out because I'm exhausted and they're bouncing off the walls, right? And it was just a place for them to run and play and do some like ninja kind of stuff. And, they had a blast. So look for things like that too, because businesses are going to be looking to, reinvigorate the days that they lost income on. And they're going to be looking to continue to market and promote. And at the same time, they're going to be looking to serve because they probably also have their own kids that are bouncing off the walls. And they're like, let's just get them out. Give yourself grace if you need to rely on technology to get you through this time. So if you have charged switches or charged tablets, go ahead and use those when you need to. Just try to, intersperse it with some of the other things you want to try to get them to do. So that number one, they don't chew up all the battery in one setting, but also so that they get used to kind of like slowing down their regulation down to what it's like without technology being their focus. But most importantly, remember to have fun with your kiddos. If you don't get snow all the time, this is really fun for them and it can be fun for you too, as long as you guys dress warm. So make sure you go out, have some fun, build a snowman, even if it's tiny, and you can really enjoy it. Or even just walk around and take a look at all of the ice and all of the craziness that it's doing to the environment around you. You'll be amazed at some of the things you'll see, and it can be really beautiful. So here's a few of the things that we ran into as we've gone through this in the past and some of the things we've done. I think one of my favorite stories was actually when I first moved south and we got an ice storm, like literally, I don't know, days after I moved here, and I was like, "Oh, I can't go to work. Oh, wait, I just have to walk across the hallway." But I ended up going outside. We had a little bit of snow. I made 2 snowmen on the back of my sedan, so they were on the back of the trunk. And the next morning, it was a man and a woman snowman, and the next morning, the man was pushed off by the woman, or at least that's what it looked like. It was kind of funny. So, even the snowmen have opinions about who they want to date. So remember that you do not have to be perfect. You are already a superhero because you are a single parent. And, many parents with partners can't even handle like 24 hours with their kids by themselves, and you do it daily. So take pride in that, wear your cape with pride, and you got this. We're doing a new movie recording. Do, 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 do. All right. Something. Consider something. I don't know what I was going to say. What was I going to say?
You are so loved. You are enough.
And you got this.